in culture in culture and religious beliefs, and political ideologies. We are stretched across a wide chasm, not as close as we used to be. Perhaps that is contributing to our disorientation. And when individuals are wounded, it affects their families. No one among us would say what happens to one doesn't affect others. It does. And as more and more people become wounded, more and more families are impacted. And the greater the number of families that are impacted and wounded and lost, and having lost their point of reference in life, the more our communities become disoriented. Disoriented communities cross geographic boundaries, cross our local communities, and across our country, contributed to more disorientation nationally. So this is a very significant matter, because we now have a more collective group of disorientated individuals and communities, which is why we are all needed. I was the fortunate nurse practitioner in a health appraisal clinic run by Dr. Vincent Folletti back in the 80s. Dr. Folletti was the founder of the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And I bring this up because I think this also has contributed to our disorientation in our families and communities. You see, what he discovered was there is a direct correlation between the number of adversities a child experiences while their brain is growing and the number of chronic illnesses one will face. Further study revealed that it's not only a cause and effect, or it's not only a correlation, there is a cause. You see, rising exposures to adversity, traumatic events, affects our brain, and that affects our genetic makeup. You see, there's an alteration in both our brain and our genetics, and that genetic changes that occurs from the rising levels of cortisol caused by stress causes the intergenerational transmission of wounds. No wonder we're in an epidemic of disorientation. So what is our true north? I mean, I think we all know, but I'm just going to say what I think it is. I think our true north is our God of Abraham, the one thing that has been unchanged across time, constant, unchanging reference point across millennium for individuals to calibrate their own life. This calibration is necessary for human family to function, and I believe it's because we're designed to be in relationship with this God of Abraham, and that's when we're healthiest. When we are disoriented from this true north, we need to heal, and healing happens when we calibrate our compass, when we eliminate the obstacles to the compass being able to find north. Much like lead interfering with the magnetic field, disorientating a compass, causing it to spin wild. That's what happens when we lose our sight of our true north. We become unwell. So healing can be described in many ways. Jesus taught through parables. I like teaching through metaphors and analogies. So I've come up with something that I call the healing framework. It's based on the 4 stages of wound healing as a metaphor for our emotional healing. Let me just summarize for you. Stage 1 is hemostasis. It's when we start bleeding. The body needs to stop the flow of essential elements from our body so that we can survive. In stage 2, once the bleeding is stopped, the body needs to defend itself at the site of the wound from invaders, bacteria, organisms, fungus, viruses, and also any obstacles to healing, such as foreign bodies or the buildup of dead wound tissue. So this stage requires the body to unify its efforts to work together in creating an army of defense. And in stage 3, also called the proliferation stage, the body has an amazing capacity to proliferate an increased number of blood vessels at the site of the wound so that it can deliver an expansive amount of healing fluid to build new tissue, build back collagen, build back the scaffold for the wound gap to fill in. Stage 1 I have labeled as awareness that we're wounded and awareness that we need a purpose to keep going. And the purpose is found in our true north. Stage 2 I have labeled a little differently than what I told you when I turned in my original application. I now call this acknowledgement, not authenticity. Acknowledgement of our unity. We work best when we're unified as a team, like those defending white blood cells and T helper cells. And in stage 3, that proliferation phase, I call that the action phase. You see, it's not enough to be aware that we're wounded and aware of our purpose. It's not enough to unify if we don't act. We have to trigger that action potential to do something more, to build back the tissue, to fill in the gaps that exist. And in stage 4, which is called the maturation phase, the body has a need to transform that new tissue that's filling the gap to make it a little bit stronger, a little more flexible, to be more functional. It will never resume to what it was prior to the injury. And that is why I call stage 4 acceptance. Sometimes we just have to accept the scars we're left with. But fortunately, when it comes to emotional healing and spiritual healing, there is not an end point of scar tissue. We can continue to transform and heal until the day we die.
Deborah, I'm going to interrupt you.
These stages.
Deborah, can I interrupt you to tell me where on the slides I'm supposed to be so people can follow?
I'm on 8.
You're on 8. So what is the title on that one? Do you know?
Navigating through problems. I think that's what it is.
Navigating is across healing stages?
Sure. It starts with acute, the problems are acute pain, confusion, a loss of direction, feeling abandoned or betrayed, questioning self-worth.
Okay.
So it's across problems in stage 1.
Okay, my apologies, everybody.
I can keep talking, and I think you'll catch up with them.
Okay,
Deborah,
keep going.
Yeah. Sorry, this is Karen McDonald in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, everybody. Would it be helpful if you cued Terry when you want the slides changed?
It would if she sees them. Okay. I have requirements for healing gift exchanges, the bleeding stage. You went past that.
You can go to that. I'll just jump ahead to that. It's fine.
Okay, I'm ahead. That's what I needed to know. Okay,
so no,
solutions.
You have what I think is, I used to call it slide number 10, requirements for healing, gift exchanges in the bleeding stage.
Okay, my apologies for interrupting.
If that's where you're at, that's where I will be.
Thank you.
Okay, can everybody see the slides? Okay, so in stage 1, when bleeding is happening, for healing to occur, I believe there has to be a reciprocal giving and receiving of gifts. I've listed them on the slide, but I'm going to summarize them for you. I believe all of us are navigators on healing journeys with others around us. And as navigators, you at some time or another will be either a giver or a receiver of these gifts. When you recognize and acknowledge another person's pain and suffering, you help them in acknowledging and accepting their own woundedness. That's the first step out of denial and into healing. When you offer a non-threatening presence without judgment, you create space for another to be open and vulnerable, another necessary step in their healing. And when you provide resources and information, you are enhancing another individual, a family, or a community's space for being able to trust. And when you withhold information and resources, you may actually increase mistrust. Providing assurance that you're willing and able to help others and backing this up with your actions increases acceptance of your assurance, acceptance by those who are wounded, and assurance that they will be safe expressing their own vulnerability. So to give you some examples of what I'm talking about when I mention these healing gifts that we exchange, some more tangible examples you might see on the slide. There's a list of them, and I'm sure we're all as uh,
Deborah, are you good? Am I bad?
providers in one form or another, very familiarly and professionally. Help to others when they're in need. It helps good under one roof, because those who are, move forward. This is the first time I'm seeing the slides on my screen, sorry. Yeah, there you go. So all of these, we all participate in providing these in one fashion or another. But I was struck by how valuable it is to put these all under one roof, such as with a family justice system, because the most vulnerable cannot access these healing gifts if they're not readily available. So now healing ministers as skilled navigators, that's what you all are. You are navigators that help others across the stages of healing. Never underestimate your value, your purpose, and the contribution that you give to the bigger picture of those who are wounded. You see, others, you might think what's obvious is actually quite amazing to others. Others look up to you as a navigator, especially when you're able to hold a firm when the world is spinning around you, maintaining your perspective, your true north. It is an example that strengthens others in their path. You see, to much whom is given, much is expected. We have been given gifts and talents, and we are expected to give them. And not only are we expected, people look up to us more than I ever realized. One word misspoken, if it's not returned with acknowledging a mistake, it interferes with that healing process. It disrupts trust. So being the person in the room to help others, to help them find their divine connection is expected, and it is very possible when we ourselves maintain our own true north. What we can do is help others eliminate the distractions from finding their true north by helping them eliminate mistruths, false beliefs about themselves, about others, realigning them with tools to help them in their healing, helping them forgive themselves or others, helping them to release shame and guilt. These are all obstructions to finding true north that we can help others eliminate. Next slide. I chose a few examples across history that I believe are excellent examples of navigators helping others find their true north. And none of them are physicians or ministers, which reminds me that all of us can be navigators. Frederick Douglass was an example of somebody who definitely was in stage 1 wound healing. He had been stripped of his identity fully by removing him from his family and his culture, his identity. And in that woundedness, he received a gift. Somebody gifted him the ability to learn how to read, and they did this at their own expense, their own risk to their own well-being. And in teaching him to read, he developed an awareness of things he might not have otherwise known, and that sparked a life of curiosity, opened doors to understanding. And in that process, he was able to recreate his purpose in life. No longer was he wounded in stage 1 without hope of a purpose, without an identity. He had a new purpose. He became an advocate back in the 1800s, and through history as a mentor and example, continues to be that advocate for others in their own state of wound healing, and for healers as navigators to help us use him as a role model to help others who are wounded to stop the hemorrhage of hope. Next slide. In the second stage of healing that I mentioned earlier, inflammation, physically, I mentioned that the body is fighting to eliminate debris and invaders. Emotionally, what's happening is we maybe that toxic surge of stress hormones is triggering the fight or flight response, or maybe even freeze. And in our spiritual healing, what may be happening is that elimination of those false beliefs, confronting what they are, and harmful relationships in one's life that are interfering with their spiritual well-being. This awareness creates the foundation for a deeper healing, moving from that crisis of initial survival into the next phase of defense, defending ourselves. When false beliefs are eliminated, just like dead tissue and foreign bodies need to be removed. Toxic relationships and bad, unhealthy patterns of behavior are eliminated. All of these exemplified in depression, suicide attempts, job loss, divorce, incivility, those things I alluded to earlier when I called them the disorientators. Frederick Douglass was aware of his new identity, and that propelled him into a life of service, ready to confront harm to not only himself and individuals, but families and his community, and communities that would surpass him through well over 100 years. Next, please. So I mentioned gift exchanges in phase 1. Now we're going to move on to those reciprocal gift exchanges that happen in the second stage of healing. Again, I will just summarize what's on the slide. When we ourselves are willing to experience our pain and not deny it or avoid it through self-medication, alcohol, drugs, or just flat out denial, we are more able to accept safety offerings from others. You have to acknowledge the pain before you can address it. And if you're not acknowledging it, you won't be able to receive any of those safety gifts being offered. And when we're willing to accept professional help from others, we are able to offer, allow them to offer us professional expertise. We might never know how much can be gained if we don't first acknowledge that we need these services. I had an example in my childhood where I was speaking with my grandmother. She was trying to help me shortly after I had my baby. And she said, you know, Debbie, when I was younger, when my mother died and my daughter died and my husband died, all in 1 year, I was broken. And this was back in the 1960s. She shared something that really struck me more now than it did then. She said, Mrs. Anderson helped me. She was a counselor. She helped me build back my confidence so I could get out in the world and find a job. She had 1 child left to support. That Mrs. Anderson became a counselor back in the 60s when women didn't commonly do that. And that service, that healing gift to my grandmother was not only helping her, she passed that on to me. And I, in turn, have passed that belief that we need help sometimes. It helped me accept help at one time when I needed it. As I was struggling through life as a young mother and as a brand new nurse in the ICU. So that willingness to accept professional services is a step in receiving them. And when they're received, it actually helps the giver become a better giver. For practice makes perfect. And when we're willing to accept and enforce healthy boundaries, we're more able to be in healthy communities that participate in building trust, safety, free choices, collaboration, and empowerment. And all of these promote a community committed to healing activities. And when we're willing to accept an attitude of humility, our brokenness, and recognize our limitations, and we're more able to then is that at that time we're more able to receive honest feedback that we can learn from, and accountability relationships, and permission from others for us to feel our emotions, whether it be anger or grief or pain. It starts with being humble, admitting we're broken. Next slide. My next example of a historical navigator, Martin Luther King. I believe he lived in a time of inflammation, lots of pain, lots of heat, a lot of red faces, swelling, puffed up. It probably started during the time Rosa Parks was arrested. Initially, he was aware of the wounds, but in phase 2, he was willing to unite, collaborate, and confront the woundedness around him. He did this at his own expense. He was incarcerated. He was threatened with death. And I don't know exactly how this happened, but bombings were even a part of his life. Living through what happened in Selma was a time of inflamed confrontations with evil. And he served as a navigator for others who maybe didn't feel they could make a difference. But by example, he led in a way that was very different than what was expected. We all know it. He was a peaceful demonstrator. He believed in nonviolence. But one thing he was firm in, and he did not turn away from, is the belief that our freedom is never voluntarily given to us. That when we're oppressed or when we're wounded, we need to demand what's needed for healing. He lived purpose was clear, and he was essential in order to eliminate the debris and the harm that interferes with healing, like racism and in the Jim Crow South. And he believed that it was necessary to defend justice, mercy, and humility. He believed in them. We all do. They're part of our Father Abraham's mandate to us all. Next stage. In the third stage of healing, which was called proliferation, you can move one more. New material or new arrangement of the new collagen at the wound happens. There's a little bit more repairing and reconstructing at the wound site. You see, it's not quite strong yet. It needs to continue realigning fibers and tissues to build more collagen, fill the gap. And emotionally, this is kind of like finding a new identity, developing new beliefs about ourselves beyond our woundedness. And spiritually, this is a time when we reestablish a purpose. Maybe we've lost sight of a purpose, or we've become aware of a new sense of purpose or meaning in our life. It occurs after a loss, much like the loss that happens in wound tissue. It might be the loss of familiar roles in one's life, capabilities, a sense of purpose in our life, all of this contributing to woundedness. So eliminating harm and damage creates the space we need for growing and healing. Just like open vessels contributing to more flowing, healing elements, openness to change is important. Finding new purpose in the loss of roles, loss of relationships, loss of abilities, all of this is what happens in this third stage. In King's movement, what he helped rebuild was legislation and institutional structures to change the capacity for healing across the country during the civil rights movement. Next stage. In this third stage, there is also a reciprocal exchange of gifts. As you glance at the slide, I will try to summarize the giving and receiving of these gifts. These exchanges help overcome problems in the gap of identity, purpose, and our capacity, perhaps a lack of faith, especially after loss with jobs or in death of a family member, a parent, or a child. As I mentioned earlier, when one in the system is affected, the entire system is affected. When one is wounded, all are wounded. So this gift exchange is helping those problems, not just one-on-one with individuals, but with families as well. Changes in circumstances beyond our control, whether it be war, think about it, all the wars going on in our world right now, things that people have no control over, natural disasters. I live in an area with a lot of fires. I've met people who these changes in circumstances have led to woundedness that I had never anticipated. Their identity, their livelihood, their relationships, losing a home, losing memories that provided comfort and assurance. So gifts that help heal these problems, you're all familiar with them. Preceptors, mentors, like those two national figures I mentioned, or in your own personal lives, those that you know of through religious groups, through your jobs. Time and funding for exploring new ways to do things, new ways to move forward in the future to overcome these challenges. Professional and volunteer services, whether it be retraining, rebuilding skills, rebuilding confidence, advancing educational opportunities in our communities across the country. It helps rebuild confidence in individuals. When I had my baby at 14 and I had a dream to become a nurse, that would have never happened without the gift exchange of services. You see, I not only was a recipient of healthcare, childcare, but there was a program in my community that was designed to help young mothers get an education so they could become self-supporting. This is just one of many, many examples. And people in my life that have been motivational speakers that I've listened to both in the pulpit and professionally, and I'm sure you've all heard somebody yourself who has helped as a motivational speaker in the healing in your own lives or in your community. Each of these examples helps to bridge a gap in knowledge, skill, understanding, confidence, and all of this contributes to our healing. Next slide, please. My next national hero that I think serves as a great navigator for all of us is Eleanor Roosevelt. I wish I had more pictures of her, but I picked this one because I see that she's been placed on a stamp. That's how beloved she was across the country. Even though she was born into privilege, Eleanor was wounded on many, many levels. She was deeply wounded as a child. It is reported that her mother was very cruel to her. Her looks were made fun of. Her father was an alcoholic. There were abuses that occurred just through that relationship. Those two things alone are considered two of child adversities that contribute to trauma and dysfunction. She also married into a relationship that again caused more woundedness to her. Her husband became unfaithful. His health declined, and she stepped in to help compensate for his losses. So you see in stage 3, Eleanor Roosevelt rebuilt her personal sense of purpose from being a daughter to a wife to a first lady. And in that process, she reimagined herself and recreated herself. And in that process, she helped recreate our country, to rebuild our country. Unlikely, she, as a woman, was put in a position to be a delegate at the new United Nations after World War II. She was asked to step in as a commissioner for the Human Rights Commission, and she served in those roles as an advocate for others, primarily for women, for poor and marginalized people, a true navigator. She was a role model and a mentor. Next slide. Roosevelt exemplified healing gifts. She was both a preceptor and a mentor. She explored funding and helped provide funding to help rebuild to the country and our way of conducting civics. And she was a motivational speaker. Next slide. One of the sayings she is most famous for saying is a reminder to all of us: you can gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience when you face the fear involved too. And she reminds us that we must do the things that we think we cannot do. Oh my gosh. If I didn't hear other people say that and live it and be an example of it, I don't know that I'd believe it. But she is an example. She is a mentor of that. And I think that is a gift to all of us. Next stage. The 4th stage of wound healing is called transformation. In that physical wound, the scar is not as strong as it used to be. The tissue isn't as strong or as flexible. Just as in emotional stage of healing, we cannot return back to what we were before the brokenness. We need to integrate what we've learned about becoming broken and overcoming brokenness into the future, transforming our ways of feeling and believing about ourselves. As a spiritual stage of healing, this is when we find new meanings in the changes that have happened in our life, in the presence of the unchanging true north. Next stage. My last, just some of the problems that we have to overcome in this transformation phase. And I will say, as a woman over 65, I think just the aging process alone is a transformation phase where we deal with loss, a lot of loss. But you don't have to be old to experience these problems. Adjusting to new limitations, whether it's through an illness or the aging process. We all have our own personal stories of transformation. And this phase is universal, but our stories are unique. Next phase, we're going to talk about the story of Abraham Lincoln, my 4th navigator. As you can see, Abraham Lincoln lived a life of significant woundedness. He lost his mother at a young age. He lost his first true love at a young age, Anne Rutledge. As a young married man, he lost 2 children. The death of his sons, Eddie and Willie. And unknown to most, he suffered from a condition most likely known as Marfan syndrome, and consequently was perhaps at times ridiculed because of his appearance. And he definitely knew what failure looked like. Campaign after campaign, and again, he experienced loss. And each time he bounced back with more resilience. Next slide. You see, he integrated the scars in his life into mature wisdom. His lifelong depression helped him develop empathy for those who were suffering. And he definitely saw a lot of suffering living through the Civil War. The losses that he experienced helped him understand grief, that it's universal. At one time or another, we all experience it. And his physical deformities, knowing he wasn't perfect, or at least he wasn't judged as handsome or desirable, contributed to a sense of humility. And each one of those failures I mentioned politically built his resilience to finally become the president of the United States. He turned these scars into the qualifications that helped him serve as a healer across the country. Next slide. In his inaugural address, he is famous for having said, "With malice towards none and with charity for all, we will bind up the nation's wounds." He didn't say, "Let's try to get back to what we were like before." He couldn't. Just like that scar tissue, it'll never be what it was. Our country had lost 620,000 people dead. And there was no more slavery. There's no going back. We got to move forward and integrate all those changes into new ways of being and doing things. He found lessons and meanings in the scars in his life. In his acceptance speech, he said, "I claim not to have controlled the events that have happened, but confess plainly that those events have controlled me." Don't we all feel that way at one time or another? We're not really in control. No matter how hard we prepare, how much we try, we're all humbled by the reality that there is a force much greater than ourselves that's in control. And humbling ourselves to that belief is helpful. Mature acceptance is accepting that change has happened and we can't turn it around. But in spite of those changes, what we can control is our attitude towards it, what we choose to learn from it, what new meanings we can find in it that will move us forward. So using Lincoln's state malice towards none as a template for reconciliation can help us in our healing. Next slide, and you can actually go past it and move to the transformational gifts. There we go. This is our last gift exchange, reciprocal giving of gifts and receiving of gifts. You see, we all need grace, recognition, permission to grieve, affirmations, and time and space to discover new purposes. And we're all required at some time or another to receive acceptance if we're going to heal, forgiveness, a state of gratitude and recognition. To best accept imperfection and permanent changes, grace must be given, both to ourselves and to others. Acceptance of self-compassion and forgiveness of ourselves and others requires recognition of the scars and the need to be forgiven. To receive and experience gratitude requires in tandem the receiving of permission to grieve a loss. It accelerates gratitude for what remains. And recognizing with humility that we have been wounded affirms what has changed, allowing us to move forward, not as less valuable or devalued. And commitment to ongoing growth through all types of experiences, whether they're positive or negative, allows us all to discover new purposes through patience in learning and growing experiences. Examples of some gifts, some more tangible gifts of what I'm talking about in this final stage, you've probably noticed as I go down the list, some book at one time or another that was a gift that helped you in your healing. I know that Lenten study that I attended did help me in my healing. Movies. Have you attended a movie that triggered something in you that helped you heal through a loss? Testimonies and sermons given, volunteer services provided, and sometimes even received can help us in our healing, both as a giver and a receiver. So when we learn to understand, we're better at forgiving. And with our learning, we become more able to accept the changes and the woundedness without having the experience of shame. And discovering these new meanings in our life helps us integrate those losses and wounds into our future. Next slide. So this flow of gift exchanges, it has to happen both between individuals and communities and back from communities to individuals. Next slide. So the exchange from communities, like I mentioned, as a young woman, I received some gifts, can be in the example of resources that are listed here, expertise, professional services, just presence and companionship, truth, honest feedback, and stories of hope from one community to individuals. And now don't underestimate your own value as individual navigators. You too can contribute to the flow of healing gifts. Next slide. So from you as a navigator, if you offer gratitude, if you give a testimony, if you provide a service, if you gain and share wisdom learned, all of these contribute to healing when you pass them on to larger groups in your community. It increases your sense of purpose and helps others find their own purpose. Next slide. We can create this reciprocal flow of gifts by creating safe conditions where people feel safe to receive and give the gifts. I'm not going to go too far into detail about this because I know we have other speakers that are going to be talking on trauma-informed principles. But just glancing at the slide, you kind of get the gist of what I believe is necessary to help facilitate gift exchanges. At the bottom of the slide, those principles of trauma-informed care are the main things I want to focus on here, providing safety, trust, peer support, collaboration, helping empower others, and being culturally sensitive and gender sensitive. Next slide. So I mentioned the disorientation that happens in our woundedness. We can recalibrate towards true north. That is what healing is, overcoming disorientation in these 4 stages, remembering number 1, our true north does exist. It has always existed. It will continue to exist. And it is the source of our purpose. I believe discovering our purpose as a nurse is really the number 1 most important vital sign. I know we've all been taught vital signs, but I think if you don't have a purpose to keep living, a reason to want to get up in the morning and keep going, you're going to not have the motivation you need to keep trying to survive through woundedness. And it's that sense of hope that you do have a purpose that anchors us to a future. And in stage 2, you have to eliminate all those interferences to healing, just like eliminating that which interferes with the compass working, the magnetic field. We have to know what's getting in the way of the healing. And in stage 3, the rebuilding capacity, that only happens when we learn through mistake, through trial and error, when we fall away from our true north, that you can always get back. You can always find it again. Knowing that you learn through each experience how to come stronger in your faith. And in that 4th stage, the acceptance of the permanence of change, that letting go of what we don't control anymore, and holding true to the consistency of our purpose provided by our true north. Next slide. We do have reason to celebrate. We do have a constant true north, and it remains true through all of the 4 stages of healing. God is a God of love, abundant love, and that is the source of all the gifts that we exchange, the reciprocal gift giving. Next slide. This talk has put something on my heart, an invitation to you all to consider what gifts you might have to share that you've underestimated to help others find their true north, or discover who in your circle needs help finding the divine orientation, or perhaps even the barriers to sharing what might help lead to healing, or an invitation to acknowledge your own needs, a need for gifts that help in healing, where you have possibly lost your true north, or where there might be some disorientation because something obstructing your vision towards your true north. And to help identify if you are in a state of woundedness, at which stage are you? What do you have to look forward to? Do you see there is a predictable, universal truth that woundedness happens in stages and there is hope ahead always? I don't know that we're going to have time in a breakout session after this, but these are thoughts that I just wanted to leave you with. And next slide is just kind of a foundation scripturally. Move forward one more. Some of the truths that I got from biblical text came from John 10:10 about abundant life. In this, we learn you need to know the source of your purpose in life. The time is now. Don't let go of what you can do today to move forward. Our true north never changes. It never fails us. It never runs out of being able to provide us purpose. And pointing each other towards our faithful God is what we're put here to do, because God wants to be in relationship with us all. Between wounded and all of us have room for healing. And we all have access to the abundant source of healing, God's love, the source of all gifts of healing from our journey between wounded and well. Not once, but repeatedly, because we are creatures who learn through repetition. It's like we got to do it over and over again for us to get better at it. Practice makes perfect. Next slide. And I think I'm about running out of time. Some things to consider maybe after this conference. Somebody you might be able to help towards their given purpose, or an area where you can help others navigate yourself by your true north and not in reaction to your woundedness, or a new way you might experience the abundance of God's love. It's not complicated. Don't wait for conditions to be perfect. Today is the day to find new healing, one step at a time towards divine recalibration. Thank you for your attendance. Thank you for helping me with the slides. I'm done, and I want to just extend my gratitude to the conference, and I'm looking forward to the further speakers in the next few days. Thank you. Next slide is my contact information. If you want to know how to get a hold of me, I have a website, deborahpalmer.com, or you can email me, Deborah@PalmerAces. If you have more questions about the 4 stages of wound healing and you're interested in my book, information is available on my website for Between Wounded and Well, Lessons in Healing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. I just wondered if we could open it up to questions, if anyone had some questions for Deborah right now.
And so I'm going to ask real quickly before anybody else asks, because it was in the chat, Deborah, and I meant to ask in an email. And would you be willing to share your slides when I send out the certificates?
Oh, of course.
Thank you so much. I'll send them as a PDF.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's my gift.
I get that. So, as Julie asked, are there questions?
Or comments that people, want to make to Deborah even?
This is my first talk, and I really appreciate critique. I think that would be a great gift.
Mm.
It's hard to talk for an hour on this, to spread it out over 60 minutes. And I might have been over redundant in areas. So if I was, I apologize.
It's Deborah, my only thing is just learn how to tell people how to move the slide forward or
Yes, that
else
would have
manage
helped.
it. So I will say that this is meaningful to me in my history and knowing that woundedness, allowing woundedness to be felt can also bring healing. And I think I heard you say this, but correct me if I'm wrong, that in serving others, we find healing.
That's been my experience on many levels. And we all are across time. We might experience the same thing differently because our perceptions change. Perceptions of the experience change over time because where we're at in time changes.
Yeah, it's true. So I saw Nikki raised her hand.
Hi, yeah, Deborah, I just want to say this was an amazing presentation. There's several things I loved about your talk. The first one was kind of correlating, healing experiences with a medical sort of model of healing. I appreciate that. I so loved how you gave examples of historical figures in kind of transcending their previous injuries or traumas and how they went on to, truly heal in their new normal and make a difference and find their meaning and purpose. So thank you so much for that. And I loved how you talked about just in giving, we are receiving back, right? We may be giving a gift, but we're also receiving a gift in return. So it's an equitable exchange. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mary Beth had her hand up.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. I have a lot of similar comments to what was just given to you, but I love that you shared your own story right from the beginning. The historical examples were amazing because of what we know those times and what they overcame from slavery, talking about Abe Lincoln. And I'm in Illinois, so I was actually just at the Lincoln Memorial and Springfield. So I really was touched by that. And you were very positive. I love that you included your grandmother and all her wounds and how she overcame it. My grandma lived with me and very much a positive influence. I love that. You were very hopeful about the future and moving forward and the exchange of gifts. So I really loved everything. So you did a great job, and I look forward to going to your website and
Thank you.
learning a little bit more about your book and that. So thank you so much.
And Frances?
Yes, thank you so much.
Hi,
Can you,
Francis.
yes, very much. I think that the entire presentation was so beneficial. I just really appreciate you bringing in Dr. King, and because I do know a lot about what he had done, Deborah, with your presentation, all inclusive. But it was so intriguing that you brought in Eleanor Roosevelt, and you never would think that all the things that she had to go through to be of value to her role in America as a woman in America and still being strong. And so that just shows that no matter what we're going through, like you say, in helping others, we really help ourselves. And it's really a great asset to what we are focusing on and to accept, to acknowledge the pain so that we can move on. I had just had a conversation with a young lady that is going through a divorce. And so I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to hear what you had to say. And I do want to get your book to share with her to make sure that she's aware. And that's the gift that I will give her to let her know that all is not lost and it's not the end just because of what she's going through now. But you also gave great pointers on where to meet people at in their problems for transformation stage, and that's very crucial. So I really appreciate that. That was a great help.
Thank you, Frances.
Cheryl Willis.
Dr. Palmer, thank you so much. Your program was just eye-opening for me. For one thing, it got me to look at Frederick Douglass, Dr. Martin Luther King, and Eleanor Roosevelt in a different viewpoint. Eleanor Roosevelt, I know, was a very good friend to Mary McLeod Bethune, who was one of my childhood heroes and someone that I looked up to as a child and tried to emulate her in my life. So to have them brought out, and then also to look at some of the other things that Mrs. Roosevelt had to go through in her lifetime just is very eye-opening. The other thing that I wanted to state was the positivity that you gave me just by talking about having gone through your own personal struggles. It's something that we need more of in our current state of affairs so that people know that the mental health challenges that they're going through now do not have to define them. Those things do not have to be the end all to their lives. So the positivity was great, and I thank you.
Thank you. One thing I did not mention, I was afraid I was going to run out of time, is the value of being present with somebody or acknowledging one's pain. I had long conversations with Dr. Folletti, who did the ACE study. And as one of the IRB requirements to do the study, he had to have a hotline in case somebody was being traumatized, answering questions about adversity. Have you been molested, abused physically, emotionally, drug addiction, alcoholism, et cetera, et cetera. And so he had this hotline and he told me nobody ever called it, but he received many letters from patients who said, "Thank you for asking me these difficult questions about my childhood. It validated my experiences as having been something that mattered enough that you thought it was worthy of investigating." And that really struck home with me when he shared that. Just acknowledging somebody's pain validates their experience, and that alone is part of the healing process.
Well, and that's interesting, Deborah, that you say that, because I think oftentimes we, as any of us in the health ministries, feel that we have to come up with like the perfect thing to say, the perfect thing that is going to help this person, transform this person, take away their pain. I mean, that's just where we're rooted, right? We're so anxious to help and to be compassionate that sometimes we don't recognize that just being present with someone, or to your point, acknowledging someone, their pain, that it exists, and that you're sorry, that can be enough. And yet sometimes I think we don't see it as enough. So you validating that for all of us is huge, as in the work that we do, that, you know what, that is enough. And we need to be able to walk away feeling we did right by that person, just doing something as simple as acknowledgement and presence. So I really appreciate that.
I think it's called therapeutic use of self. And the one time I realized its value was when I had to go to the VA homeless shelter every morning and find out if anybody needed to go to the hospital or the doctor's office and sit there for a couple of hours. I thought, oh Lord, what am I going to do? Should I bring a blood pressure cuff? What am I going to do? You know, I need to feel useful. And so I did bring that cuff, and people did come up and sit down with me. And what I realized is they just wanted to be heard. Nobody listened to them. They had ignored them. They lost their families, their friends. They felt like such outcasts. All I did was listen to their stories, and I was so amazed. And that was truly just therapeutic use of self, just being who you are as a listener. It was so valuable. And so your point is very well taken.
So somebody else had a question. It was Allison, I believe.
Was just going to make the comment that I think listening to you, Deborah, and talking about, being a giver and then also being a receiver, it just had me thinking about that what happens is that the person who has this wound finds their true voice while they're moving toward trying to locate the true north, that they can speak it and know it will be accepted. And I think that creating that safe place for that by being a listener is so much, like you were saying, what am I going to do? No, but it's really more just being there to be able to be the listener as well.
Thank you.
Hello? I'm not sure.
You're
how to
there,
do it.
Kathleen. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. I've thank you for your points and how you pulled all together. I particularly liked one of the last comments about reconciliation. And I think that comes under the field of wisdom, and we don't have enough places yet in our culture where we have moved into that level of maturity as people. And thinking about how in our work as health ministers and nurses, how we can bring that forth more. Because many times we will find that the wounding has very open wounds. And it is very much depleting people and our communities and our culture. So I think I would love to see you underscore that, and feedback would be ways in which maybe we could get some examples. Certainly we see them in South Africa, is where it's come, but I've also seen it locally with some police, some local people, community people, and the police department have worked to give people another chance and not have to face the usual consequences for something, but to be able to make a statement about what the person had done, to ask for forgiveness, and then to say, this is what I can do to try to restore to whatever degree that is. We have a great place here in Boston at the Peace Center. It's Cherry Ames is the chaplain, but she was also the mother who lost her child many years ago. And the beauty of what's come forth has been the Peace Institute. So anyway, it's one of the places where that is also taught. Anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
So Karen, Reverend Karen has the last question, and we'll probably need to take our break. So
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Deborah. Yeah, everything everyone just said, I give my ditto to. I'm also responding to Mary Gubble's comment in the chat about our technology age where folks are looking to be heard. That's critical in an age in which people are living on our social media devices, and we're scrolling and we're focused on this second, and then we move to the next story and the next story and the next story, and we never interact or people don't interact on that social media, and it truncates our attention span and it truncates our relationships. And so you're right on, Mary, that the listening, empathetic, validating presence we give to people is at least maybe one way to counteract that and just be human with each other. So kudos to all of us wounded healers.
Amen.
Okay, thank you so much, Deborah. Wow, it's obvious that you impacted a lot of people in this talk, and we are grateful. And I'm with Nikki. I've never heard spiritual and emotional healing tied to physical healing. So I loved that I loved that analogy. So now is the time that we're going to take a 10-minute break. We will resume back here at 3:30 and be ready for our next speaker. Thank you so much.
Himself. So I'm introducing to you this evening our second speaker, Reverend Torrin T. Sanders, PhD, pastor, professor, author, politician, clinician, civic leader. Torrin T. Sanders has served as the pastor of the Sixth Baptist Church in New Orleans for over 28 years. He is also a tenured associate professor of social work at Southern University at New Orleans, a native of New York City. Dr. Sanders is a graduate of Howard University and Tulane University, where he earned his PhD in social work. As a licensed clinical social worker for over 30 years, he has worked in multiple agencies, including Children's Bureau, Volunteers of America, Milne Boys Home, and in addition, he has also had a private practice since 2004. Also in 2004, Dr. Sanders was elected to the Orleans Parish School Board, where he served twice as president. Additionally, he has served as board president for the New Orleans Council on Aging, the New Orleans Ethics Review Board, and as chair of the New Orleans Children and Youth Planning Board. He currently is a consultant for Baptist Community Ministries, providing both mental health content and therapy in its behavioral health initiative for pastors program. Dr. Sanders is the author of the recently published Child Custody Casebook, a guide for practitioners. Dr. Sanders is the recipient of many honors and awards from organizations including the FBI, Victims and Citizens Against Crime, Gambit 40, Under 40, National Association of Black Social Workers, and Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Today, Dr. Sanders will launch us into an opportunity to deepen our understanding of spirituality, learn more about its connection to health, and how to integrate spirituality in the work that we do. Let us receive Dr. Sanders at this time. Thank you for being here with us, Dr.
Good
Sanders.
afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Give me a
Yes.
thumbs up. Great, great, great. Well, thank you, Vanessa, for that kind and overly generous introduction. But I thank you. And I see also my friend, Ms. Frances Hawkins is on board. So good to be here with all of you. I need to apologize, though. I had a mix up with, I guess, my time. So I have to depart right around 4:15, no later than 4:20. So I'm going to have to make my presentation a little faster than normal, than usual. But definitely you can have access to the slides in total. And I apologize for that, just with my timing. So I'm honored to be here. I look forward to doing this presentation. Am I a host? Can I start to share? All right, let me go to and share. Let's see. Yep, there we go. All right. Can everybody see that first slide? Raise your hand one more time. All right, great. All right. So spirituality, a determinant of health. Well, I won't do that since Vanessa did a great job telling you who I am and everything. Our workshop objectives, to try to, and I know this is a very spiritual group already and faith-based group already. So, but we'll talk a little bit about spirituality since that's a key element of the presentation. And then we'll talk just briefly also about the current research and what it says about the connection between spirituality and health. And then lastly, hopefully increase our capacity to integrate spirituality into our patient/client care in both clinical and community-based ways. So first, of course, this is there are hundreds, thousands of textbooks written about spirituality and faith, religion. But I think it's safe to say that what you see here is some of the main factors that pulled from a variety of sources. And here you'll see a definition of spirituality as one's values, beliefs, awareness. It's really, I think that bottom line, it says a kind of striving towards something greater than oneself. I'll also add there, what we see there, a sense of purpose and direction, that search for purpose and direction. And also you'll find frequently in the literature a striving for meaning, a striving for meaning. What is life all about? Uh, and to go on that quest is a spiritual quest, to look at that. Do I have to do the admit here? I see somebody's trying to, okay. To search for meaning. What is life all about? What's happening that's bigger than me? All of those things collectively help us to get at what spirituality is all about. And of course, as it says there again, our values, which inform our beliefs. How aware are we of our positioning in the world that we live in? How aware are we of our connection to relationships, our connections to God, our connections even to nature? All of those connections are so important in terms of this what is meant by spirituality. And so that second point there, though, says, and which has been a debate for some, is not a debate for me. I have definitely a definite opinion about it. But you see there, it says spirituality as essence or as one dimension. And what's meant by that, of course, for some, we all have different domains of our personality, in different domains of what makes us who we are as social workers. I don't know if we have any other, a lot of social workers here. I know we have a lot of nurses and others, but we talk about the biopsychosocial, right? As when we look at assessment, the biopsychosocial assessment. And of course, spiritual could be seen then as it's just one dimension of a person's personhood, right? That is just something that we occasionally entertain and influences us, and that we interact with, and of course, different people at different levels, at different times, different spaces, different prompts that help us to lock into our spiritual side or dimension. That's one view. The other view, of course, is that spirituality is a part of our essence, that it's always there, it's always in operation, it's always driving us to some extent, whether we actually realize it or not, that it is an essential part of who we all are. And so that we cannot compartmentalize our spirituality and just say, well, that's one other thing about us. That it is so foundational to who we all are and to our existence itself, that it is at the root, at the base, at the foundation of all of us, that truly spirituality is a part of our existentiality, right? That it is a part of our basic existence, whether we recognize it or not, and whether and whether the degree we recognize it. So we have, on the one hand, spirituality as essential, and of course, if we take that definition, then that also leads to certain a way of thinking in terms of acting upon spirituality, as opposed to the one dimension context or thought about spirituality. So, of course, if we talk about spirituality, we have to talk about religion. Because for so many people talk about, well, what's the difference, right? And what are we really talking about? And so religion, as I'm sure, again, all of us are pretty familiar with, refers to, generally speaking, a set of beliefs and practices of an organized religious institution. And of course, examples, whether you're Catholic or Protestant, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and of course on and on. There are many religions, world religions that exist. When we look at that word religion itself, and there's been some debate among some scholars, but of course, when you break it down, you see there I have in the middle that re, and then that the legion, or that legion, Ligion. Many have talked about coming from that Latin root word ligare, Lig or Are, which means to bind, right? To hold. And so then if you go, and then that re, of course, obviously means, back again or to return. And so, literally that word religion means to return back, right? Or to bind something back again. And of course, therein lies kind of that dual kind of experience that some people have with religion. One, they see it as and have experienced it as binding in the most negative connotation, limiting, dogmatic, and all of those words, and to the extent even where to some people religion has caused trauma for them at some level. They call it church hurt and church trauma. And then, but on the other hand, and the way that I look at it for myself is that religion has offered me a way to reconnect with God, right? That it helps and it's helped to clarify my relationship with God. And so, of course, get multiple ways to look at it, but it relates through that, generally that organized religious expression that we all are familiar with, whether or not we are active participants in it or not. And so then we have this relationship, right, between spirituality and religion. And so I got a few statements there that really we could spend a whole hour talking about itself. And I actually have spent at least an hour or more talking about this with students and even some congregation members. Because when people say, "Well, what are you?" I say, "Well, I'm spiritual. I'm not religious." Well, I'm religious, but and we assume a level of spirituality. But that first one there says one can be spiritual without religious, right? And of course, that's probably the most common situation that we many of us will run into, where somebody will say, "Well, I'm not," we say, "Well, what, you belong to a church or whatever." And they say, "Well, no, I'm not very religious, but I am spiritual." And again, that going back to that definition that we talked about before a little while ago, in terms of that, they believe in certain values and beliefs, that they're in that quest for meaning and that search for purpose in their life, that they're aware and sensitive to their connection to God, but without any organized nature to it, or believing in a certain already pre-designed set of beliefs or creeds, as it were. So we're going to be spiritual then without being religious. At the same time, then also one can be religious without spiritual. And some people say, "Well, how, I've heard people say, no, that's not true. How can that be?" Well, because there are some people, yes, who are religious, who know all of the creeds, know all of the beliefs, and all of that, but are really not engaging in that quest for purpose, that quest for meaning, really not attuned to their connection to other people, their connection to nature, their connection to themselves, in the largest sense. And so, but they are religious there, and they may be very faithful in doing certain things, but there's a zeal, but there may not be a whole lot of other stuff going on of substance there in their actual lives, that helps them to transcend their natural experiences and understand things at a different level of depth. And then thirdly, since one can be obviously religious and spiritual, and the hope is that for those who are religious, say they are religious, that is accompanied by a level of spiritual attainment, and which all the things that I've already said go along with that, and that their religion assists them, facilitates their spiritual growth and development. As I said, that's what my religious identity does for me. I recognize it doesn't do that for everyone, but that is, and I won't say it's an optimal, but that is a mixing of two things, that where one is truly serving the other, where one's religion can serve their spiritual growth, and also then their spiritual desire for growth and meaning is also serving their religious commitments and their religious participation. And then, of course, lastly, there says, then one can be non-religious or non-spiritual. And you say, I have two question marks there. Well, clearly, we said one can be non-religious in terms of not being a part of any of those organized bodies or feeling drawn to that. And now the question is also, can one be non-spiritual? And, that's why I have the question mark there, because on the one hand, one can say that even if somebody said, well, I'm not very spiritual, but does that mean still that there's something going on in that, in their quest for purpose and meaning? And are they, again, having come to that way of responding to that question because they have come to some conclusions about certain things, and they've made a decision in some way about how they want to live their life, or if they've already set upon some type of purpose or meaning that they think or feel maybe not aligned with what others may consider as a spiritual way of being. So again, in our practice, I know in my practice, whether as a social worker or as a pastor, I've encountered people in each of these categories. And there may be some other categories that one can think of that go along with this to help us to, go deeper in terms of really understanding the relationship between these two concepts, spirituality and religion, and what have you. So as I get into, now we've talked about, spirituality, its relationship to religion or non-relationship to some extent. And so I just want to talk briefly now about the determinants of health concept. And again, I'm sure many of you are aware of this, but this determinants of health concept was really emerged in the 1970s, although there was, evidence of it even earlier than that. But historically in the medical profession, amongst health professionals, there was just a focus in terms of disease and illness on strictly biological and medical factors. And I put some in parentheses there. Of course, one's heredity and their DNA, their bloodline, so to speak, and which we know is a factor in terms of one's health. But then also lifestyle factors, particularly as it may have subjected them to more specific risks, whether it was exposure to lead or asbestos, even today, kind of things. And so you have that, and then also healthcare services. If a person didn't get access to healthcare, and of course that could create if they didn't get preventive factors, whether it was vaccinations or other things, of course, which could create issues. But then also even how they just negotiated themselves through the medical system. And so, but historically, there was just, that kind of really insular focus. And then, of course, beginning in the 70s and beyond, then a strong consideration of what are the non-medical, non-quote unquote biological factors that lead to an impact a person's overall health status. And so, in fact, not only does the CDC, but the World Health Organization, they promote three overall categories of these determinants of health. And of course, you see them there, the social and economic environment. And so, of course, you break that down and you can see, of course, one's neighborhood and how that the relationships within neighborhoods, economic environment, so poverty, and related issues there, the physical environment that a person is in. I mentioned, already like lead and asbestos, but also recreational environments and the ability to have places to play. Even for children here in New Orleans, when the homicide rate was very high, and parents were not allowing their children to play outside. And so, what's the impact of even that on the health of a child? Not being able to freely play, and get some grass on them, so to speak. And then, of course, other personal factors or characteristics also plays into determinants of health. And so when we look at this specifically, that social determinants, and some of these I've already just mentioned, but let's briefly again, economic stability. And so we know, yes, if someone has tremendous economic instability, which relates in frequent, evictions or housing changes and just, other things related to that, then we know that obviously that can impact a person's health status. In fact, just a brief note, even right now, November 1st, if there's nothing changing with the government shutdown, that thousands of people here in Louisiana are going to be their SNAP benefits will not be there come November 1st. And so, food banks and others are looking to see how, that will impact, the living and the care of a lot of people who depend on those types of resources. I mentioned neighborhood before, and then of course healthcare, access and availability and quality. Education is another social determinant. Again, being literate enough to first understand the medicine that you're taking, to be literate enough to understand how to read the labels on food, to be literate enough to be able to understand what the doctor and what the nurse is saying, and to ask questions, to be educated enough to understand your own symptoms so that you can properly explain them. And all of those things go into end up into affecting one's health, and then of course one's social context. So that was just an overall. So then when we get to spirituality itself, which then could be seen as, again, on the one hand, as a part of the personal characteristic piece, or again, one's social being, in terms of the relationships that one has in terms of, and again, that deals within this spirituality. And so there are numerous articles out there now in the growing body of research, empirically done, as well as qualitative research, that strongly suggests, and I'll read the quote here, it says, the growing body of robust empirical research strongly links spiritual beliefs, states of being, communal practices, and private rituals to a range of beneficial health outcomes, including lower all-cause mortality. And so there we have it. Of course, I could have given you other quotes, but there is enough research now, I'll say, to not just suggest, of course, in research, we don't use the word prove, but to really let all of us know that there's a there, so to speak, when it comes to the impact of taking one's spirituality into account, into one's health status, and how that affects their health. Its importance. So not only do we know that spirituality has an impact on a person's health, but there have been research that also show that people, our patients, our clients, want us as providers to integrate their spirituality into their care. This first quote deals, or relates, not a quote, but a point there relates to the counseling process, and as a social worker. But there was a Gallup poll way back in the 1990s that said 81% of respondents wanted to have their spiritual values integrated into the counseling process. Now, I got my MSW back in the late 80s, and I know even back then, what we have what's called the Council of Social Work Education, which is the accrediting body for schools of social work around the country. And back at that time, CSWE, the accreditation body, spirituality was not a part of the what they call the EPAS, or the things that were the standards for what was to be included in the courses. So spirituality, we had a course on death and dying, which of course also deals with spirituality to some extent, but that was not a required part of the curricula of schools of social work. Since that time, then it was placed into as a standard. And I think this was in response to the fact that, as people were asked, then we know that yes, that we should not shy away from it and think that we are unprofessional if we question clients or patients related to their spirituality and their spiritual values. And then you do see a quote here from Kanda, and it says, "To address spirituality is not to practice religion, but to affirm the wholeness of their being." And I really, really love that. To address spirituality is not to practice religion, but to affirm the wholeness of their being. And so I like to actually put it this way also, that to not address spirituality is to be guilty of malpractice. And I say, and especially on the social work side, and I know because we want to, if spirituality is a strength that helps people to cope, that helps people to manage, if it is a personal asset, then why would we ignore an asset? Why would we ignore a source of empowerment in terms of that could help our patient or client to progress and improve their quality of life during our season with them, our time with them? So it's important. We see from that clients want it, but also we recognize that people are whole people, and that we should not. And I hear that you could use this uh, figuratively, cut people up and take out the spirituality when we're serving them. And of course, I know I may be preaching to the choir here, but as we carry that message to other people in our various places of work who may not be sensitized to the importance of spirituality, help them to recognize that they're being the strange ones, that they're being the out of bound ones by failure to include the wholeness of a person into their care. I hope that makes sense there. So. And of course, there's several studies on the use of prayer. Now, prayer, of course, is just one spiritual practice. And as I know, and we all know, there's many examples of spiritual practices. But this one, prayer, has definitely been the subject of study in terms of its impact in terms of on a person's health status. And I'll just give you what's one study here about the helpfulness of prayer. And it says 100 subjects were studied on the day before they had heart surgery. 96 of them used prayer as a coping mechanism, and 70 out of the 96 gave it the highest possible rating of helpfulness. And of course, in the clinical setting, it is necessarily not, it's not up for us to suggest or to again, we're not practicing religion, we're not trying to convert people to anything in particular, but simply at least to ask the question, or if not even asking the question, listening to people and saying, what is it that is what you think will help you? What is it that you that has helped you in the past? And of course, in conversation, I frequently hear something related to spirituality, and then it's simply about going down that road and walking through that door that the patient or client has already opened for us, to encourage them to use what works for them, what as their natural form of anxiety reduction and of stress reduction and of coping and of healing for themselves. And so, of course, this is just one spiritual practice among many. So then how do we put it into practice in terms of incorporating, again, our spirituality with the recognition that it is a determinant of health? So I talk about here, mentioned here, our clinical approach and the community-based approach. The clinical approach, there are numerous, several instruments of sort that we can use in our work that are very quick and easy to use to help us tune in, which is a word that we use in social work frequently, but to help join a patient or client in terms of their spiritual development, where they are spiritually, so that we can then help them to access that to use in terms of their health status and their wellness. So one, it's called FICA. Of course, when I first, read that many years ago, and I said, what does FICA have to do with my check, and this, and this? But I realized what's something different, right? So FICA, F standing for faith, right? Its importance or its influence, right? And of course, these are questions that we're asking, and then community, and so right, so you're part of a faith community, and then action and care. How have you put your faith in action in the past? All right, how has it worked for you? How have you relied upon it, and how have you expressed your faith, your spirituality before in a way that's been helpful to you? And some, again, may say, well, I pray, I meditate. Others may say, hey, I go and find I go to the lakefront. I serve others. I make sure that I do something for somebody else on a regular basis. And that gives me a sense of meaning and purpose. And that helps me exercise my faith. And I find that it helps me out dealing with, my own health situation and health status. So that's one way. That's one. The other one is the CSI, MEMO, MEMO. CS, again, and these overlap in terms of what they're getting at. But again, these are quick ways that we can just put in our mind to remember kind of how to get at it. So CS, all right, does your religion provide or spirituality provide comfort or reduce stress, right? And so there's that comfort and stress reduction. Does it influence your medical decision, for the I there? And so that first question, though, with the CS, does your spirituality provide comfort or, relief, from stress? And again, because we can't assume that for some people, unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, religion or their spiritual, where they are in their spiritual development, may provoke anxiety for some, based upon past experiences or what they've been taught, which may not have been productive for them in that arena. So again, first, questioning, does it provide them with some comfort or stress reduction? And then if so, how does it influence your medical decision in terms of what's going on with them? And then the MEM relates us to membership. So are you a member of an organization? And of course, that would be, church, temple, what have you, mosque, and help. That would help us again to also understand again where they may be coming from, what gives them a sense of rootedness, and again we can to extent we can acknowledge that and support them in that, and then of course that leads to there. Is it supportive? If they're a part of an organization, then do they find support there? And then just any other spiritual factors or issues that they may want to bring up. So you have to have two kind of, and we call them spiritual history questionnaires, but they're ones that you can easily remember and use. Some people may find difficulty finding the language in order to use, but this helps us with that. And of course, I've seen many of you, I'm sure, work in hospital settings. And so we know that the Joint Commission, a spiritual development or spiritual assessment is actually a part of JCO accreditation. And they look at, again, clients, what are, you'll see again with some repetition here, but what are the client's spiritual beliefs, significant spiritual practices, or their denominational affiliation. So, some of the same things I just mentioned there. But again, JACO as an accrediting body, as well as others in the social work profession, whether it's CARF or COA or some other accrediting bodies, they also have now grown to make sure that the spirituality piece is also included and not excluded, would probably be a better way, in our work with clients and patients. And I mentioned this already in terms of listening for clues or cues, because many times, if we let our patients talk and our clients talk for a few moments, they will let us know where they are in terms of their spirituality and or religion. And so many times it's really just about, we don't have to go through the FICO or the CSI memo. They already will lay it out for us before we can even ask, if we allow them to. If we, don't always go with our agenda, but go with an agenda to hear from them first. But if not, then of course, asking the question related there, do you have any spiritual or religious beliefs that may impact your care, that you'd like us to talk about in terms of your care, or to get you someone that you feel comfortable talking with during this time to help you with your health care and your health status. And I'm sure everybody already knows this in terms of the key role of chaplaincy. But there's a lot of studies that suggest that there's a dire need to scale up, that there are not enough chaplains. And again, the argument, of course, here is that if it works, then why not do what works? And so some of the data says that 76% of hospitals offered spiritual care services, mainly chaplaincy. And a poll through Gallup a few years ago found that 1 in 4 Americans have been served by a chaplain, half in healthcare settings, others in other settings, whether it may be police departments or in that kind of setting. And then the topics that they address, death and dying, mental health issues in general, dealing with change, and dealing with loss, which all makes sense in terms of especially in the healthcare setting. And so again, whatever we can do to support and make the case for increased chaplaincy services, especially in healthcare settings, knowing that there's really not enough, again, would be very based upon the data, based upon what we know, is a key approach to really help people recognizing the spirituality as a determinant of people's health. And then lastly, the community approaches. And I know I've been affiliated with Baptist Community Ministries for many years now. I can't even remember how many years, but it's been a joy and a blessing to be with them. And of course, they have done and are doing many community-based congregational health approaches, recognizing that pastors and faith communities are essential in really improving the health status of others, and that when we tie in people with their spirituality to their bodies and to their health status, that it can make a huge difference. And some research talks about a church, in Memphis, where they worked with 690 or so Black churches, and they partnered with the health system out there, used connected hospitalized members with navigators. And what everybody wants to hear about is see a decrease in readmissions, and obviously, and also a decrease in mortality. And so, of course, it's a natural ministry of the church and of churches to be involved in this type of work. There's many churches already are doing this kind of on their own in informal ways, but to really formalize that system of care that already exists, it can really yield much larger results and even for people who may not actually access healthcare on a regular basis. This also can serve to increase access for many people who, especially Black men, who seems like in many cases, more than others, it seems, are much more resistant to engaging with the healthcare system for a lot of reasons. So we have that example there. In North Carolina, they did also something very similar. And instead of calling them navigators, they called them connectors there with local medical centers. And there they highlight the fact that they've saved over $2.5 million over previous annual charity giving in terms of how they've been able to impact the community and really make an impact with people's health on a long-term basis. As you know, the healthcare systems can be so confusing and so difficult and really discouraging to a lot of people, especially our elders, and again, those who already have distaste for and distrust for medical systems. So again, the church, in appealing to their faith and their spiritual growth and development, and that making that connection can really be a great asset in terms of bridging that gap. Here in Louisiana, and they've been trying to get actually my church involved. We were involved for a little while, but then with COVID, things kind of got messed up. But there's a program here called Louisiana Cherish Study, and they're working with over 40 plus churches specifically to try to prevent cardiovascular disease with Dr. Ferdinand here locally is working here in this area to do that. So we see and I'm sure all of you are probably working in those areas, given the nature of your mission with the organization here, that is what you all do and recognize. Lastly, all of this also just, causes all of us individually to reflect in terms of, if we're going to really help someone else with their spirituality and their health, recognizing its connection, then we also always is a place for examining ourselves and where we are and how we represent those concepts and that stance. And so becoming spiritually competent, of course, it also entails being willing to grow and become more aware of not only our own spiritual worldview, but look at our own biases so that they don't become barriers for our effective engagement with others, our clients or patients, as we help them to use their own spirituality as a determinant of their own health. So we want to be a bridge builders and not barriers. And so definitely examining ourselves and in how we see our own spirituality, accepting other spirituality and their worldview is highly important. And then that kind of begs the second point there, developing non-judgmental understanding of the client's spiritual worldview. And so there's several theorists that deal with faith development. One well-known theorist is Fowler, Fowler, and he talks about that not everybody gets to this stage where they can firmly believe their view in spirituality and yet fully accept other's worldview in terms of their spirituality. Some people at their level of growth, they can only be defensive when their worldview is to them seems to be challenged, or they're presented with an alternative spirituality worldview. And so and that's a natural part of growth, but of course, as practitioners, it's incumbent upon us to then get beyond that stage so that we can fully, if maybe accept's not the word, but again, be non-judgmental and assist each other persons, clients and patients in their own spiritual development as it impacts their own health. And then lastly, there's an increasing ability to create and implement strategies that are appropriate, sensitive, and relevant, again, to the client's worldview. And so that's helping maybe to enter their world so that we can help them more in terms of, again, effectively using their spirituality asset, as if you would, to impact their health and their own well-being. I brought in one scripture here as I close. I know it's familiar to all of us. It says, "Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth." And there again, I love this scripture for its connection and recognition. It should be made as prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospers. And of course, we want to see that people, all of us share the desire that people are their best self in terms of their physical health, but then also their inward health, that invisible part of us that is also healthy and prospering, where we can see growth and development. And we know that there is that connection, not only mind and body, but spirit, mind, and body, that is so important in all of our lives. And so, hopefully that's our prayer for everyone that we also come into contact with. Lastly there, and I'll take a few questions if you like. My email address is pastorsanders@cox.net. And you see my cell phone there. If you'd like to contact me, 504-579-4499. And I think, I got some references there. I think I already emailed it to Ms. Terry, but that's it.
You did.
Does anyone have any comments or questions for Dr. Sanders?
Can you stop sharing, Dr. Sanders?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
That's okay.
All right.
Give us that information for your name and
Sure.
phone number in the chat, maybe.
Okay. Yes. Excellent.
Mary, I will send out the slides with the certificates.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That'd be good.
He gave us permission at the beginning.
Yes.
I just want to say it's amazing to see how far we've come, right? When a lot of us were being taught about social determinants of health, spirituality wasn't as
part of it,
as important or as tantamount as it is seen now. And it's a lot of work based on, your education, Dr. Sanders, and other people that brought this to the forefront and really make us think about what is important to people, and taking away our own biases, but also asking the question and realizing, like you said, to not ask is malpractice. I loved that line. It's like, just stuck with me. To not ask is malpractice. It's a great line. Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm going to comment. I loved your talk about being present for other people and not judging, and being open to what their spirituality is, even when it is not our own, that it's a point of growth. People from the board know I'm involved in interfaith, so I just was impressed with your education on this. I thank you for emphasizing that.
Thank you so much.
Francis, you have your hand held.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Pastor Sanders. He's worked with us for a very long time. And the note well taken that there's a lot that can be missed and has been missed because we did not previously, Julie, as you were talking about, including spirituality or realizing our own biases against others' level, whether it's in religion or spirituality. But the focus on spirituality really opens the door for us to, like in your definition, Pastor Sanders, about the wholeness of being, to just accept people for where they are so we can provide services to those persons without getting into proselytizing, I want to say, in delivering care. So I really appreciate, even though you are in in the recruiting of people from the world to save their souls, you stay and make sure that you discuss the importance of just knowing where people are and looking at their being as a whole to deliver care, especially
Yes.
with social determinants. And I think that FICA, I mean, I know what you were saying, but FICA could cause you to have some serious issues
That's right.
without it being the acronym.
Karen?
And I think you probably need to run, Dr. Sanders. I'll make a quick comment.
okay.
I really appreciated your emphasis on most of the time, we don't have to direct a conversation. We listen. And people will, when we bring that presence we talked about in the previous presentation, that empathetic, open, non-judgmental presence, that's how people will know it's a safe place to talk about where they are spiritually. And then we can just go from there to weave that into the whole health aspect that we're all about here through Health Ministries. So thank you for reminding us of that. We're not in charge. I remember a chaplain once saying that when he meets someone, whether for the first time or the 10th time, he walks in saying, I know nothing.
Yes.
I'm here to see where they are.
Yes. 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 Thank you. And it's so important also, even as a pastor, if I'm meeting other people, and they're struggling, if they're Catholic, I say, well, when's the last time you talked to your priest? And they're like, oh, well, you think I can call him? I'm like, yeah, that's what we're here for. We don't drop down from the sky on Sunday morning and then go back up. We stay here. And so connecting people, especially during those moments, the moments that people come to see us clinically or what have you, are excellent learning moments and growth moments for people. And so especially in their spirituality. And so we should help people to get connected or reconnected using those moments for that purpose.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Sanders. We are so grateful for this reminder and for the new things that we've learned. Again, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of information with us.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Bye-bye now.
All right, take care.
Have a
Bye.
good meeting.
Thank you, Doc.
So now I would like to introduce Tom Pruski, who will provide the introduction for the next speaker.
Thank you. Just let me get my camera up here. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Maryland. Good to be with you, all of you. Former board member of HMA and here to introduce Abet Jamison, who is one of our health minister graduates from Wesley Theological Seminary, and she's going to be our last speaker for today. Obed is a faithful, lifelong learner with a passion to share knowledge with others. She has presented and coached hundreds in business development, personal development, and community development. She is growing in her walk and has published 2 books that highlight overcoming life's obstacles with a focus on guidance and wisdom of the Holy Spirit. She's been awarded national and local recognition for her work in youth development. She enjoys life with her husband of 42 years, 18 grandchildren, again, 18 grandchildren, yes, family and friends, surrounded by a lot of love, that's for sure. It is her hope to be a quiet explorer while embracing those around her with care and sincere interest in the matters of the heart. And it's my great joy to introduce Obet.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Oh, our quiver is full, most definitely. So thank you, everybody, for letting me wrap up the afternoon. I am going to say I'm going to ask for your active participation this evening in terms of some activities, some time in the chat, and also coming off mic. So I'm going to share my screen. Terry, can I do that?
I will make you a co-host, Obet, okay?
Okay. Okay. Make sure I'm set up correctly. Everybody sees my arrow over here. Hello, fellow HMA. Am I sharing? Thank you. All right, so I am Obed. Thanks, Tom, for that wonderful introduction. But I am also the small child that grew up in Newark, New Jersey. I'm the child of Mary Dell. I'm the grandchild of Callie and Catherine, and I am the great grandchild of Mama Joe. And I share that with you all because this is my history. These are the women who brought me forward and taught me how to be in this world. And I can appreciate Deborah because one of the pivotal points of my life was the King assassination. And I saw what that type of turmoil can do to a community. I saw the riots after that, and I was about 6. And it was just something that I could not grasp as a 6-year-old, someone tearing up their own community. And so those were one of the things that has really been a pivotal point of my life because after that, I saw the drugs come into our community and I saw what that does to a community. And so I got into youth development because I saw a child um, calling for her mom. And I went to see why her mom wasn't coming. I just kept hearing, Mommy, come on, Mommy, come on. And when I went to see what was happening, her mother was in a heroin knot almost to the ground. And I was like, I don't know what has her mother in that situation, but I do know this child is in a space that she has no control over. And so I went into youth development. So that's the history I'm bringing with you all, to you all today. But also in that, I was a child that talked back to teachers and then I shied away from crowds. And I say talk back to teachers because it's a matter of perspective. I was one who just had questions. And I wanted you to explain why you were telling me to do the things that I do. But it would come home on the report card as, oh, that's a good student, but she tends to talk back. And so as we go throughout the rest of this evening and this, however much time we have left, I'm going to ask you to kind of bring a little bit of yourself as well. I am the teenager that experienced more life in ways my mother would not know. So there were some things that I did to befriend others that if I look back now, it breaks my heart. But I'm also a woman that has embraced all of that from my childhood history so that now I'm in a place where I can just kind of bask in the sun and grow in the light of the Lord. And so I want to welcome you all to this presentation by asking you to put in the chat what is a strength that you have embraced, or what is a character trait that you have embraced? And if you can make it an alliteration of you, that would be ideal. For me, with the name Obed, I have come to be known for myself as obedient Obed. And obedient for me is listening to the Lord and how He's guiding me. It's being obedient as a wife to my husband. It's being obedient as a mom. And I've learned a lot over the years on what obedience means. And that means removing myself from the situation and allowing others to walk with me. So if you would, in the chat, just maybe if put something, a character trait of your own, a strength that you have, and introduce yourself in that way, please. And I will put my obedient Obed in here. And I do hope you don't mind being with me this evening and participating. Compassionate Carol, compassionate Anne. All righty. Ooh, encourager Pam, Regina, the lover of strangers. Caring Rebecca, nice. Okay. Oh, I miss Joyful. Joyful, compassionate Carrie, excellent. Oh, persistent Palmer, planner. Oh, encourager, loving Linda. Loyal Nikki. Kind Kelly. Inviting Wendy, Tranquil Mary Beth, Encouraging Kathy, Bridge Builder Lily. I hope I'm saying your name right, Lily. Oh, Caring Gwen. And hopefully I got everybody, but welcome everyone. Grateful Shannon. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the reason I ask you to do this is because it's important for us to recognize our strengths. And again, I'm coming from working with youth, and I see what can happen when we don't allow our youth to see their strengths. I've worked in communities where we come with great intentions, but we don't recognize the assets that we bring. And it's kind of detrimental to our youth. And then I'm at the place now where the youth that I once worked with are now the adults. And they are the adults of children who are coming up in the same cycle. And so for me, it's important to recognize what strength we all bring and whatever way we bring that. And so today, this evening, we're going to recognize the history we bring. We're going to recognize our strengths and our talents. We're going to highlight our spiritual determinants of health and our spiritual healing. And we're going to develop a plan to find our true north. Right? And so one of the things about doing that is I need to get rid of this because it's in my brain. Can't see you all. Thank you. Stress unmanaged causes all sorts of problems like insomnia, muscle tension, high blood pressure, and heart disease. And Dr. Sanders closed us out pretty well in terms of a segue into this because he asked, where are we ourselves? Because we don't often, at least I'm speaking from first person, I don't often look at myself as I should. And so what I'm going to ask us to do is if you have a paper, if you have pen, if you have a piece of pencil, whatever that may be, I want you to close your eyes, all right? And look at yourself from your mind's eye, all right? Close your eyes. Take a couple of minutes until you can get a real picture of yourself with your eyes closed. And I want you to grab that pencil, that pen, that paper, and I want you to draw yourself as your mind's eye sees you. It'll take about 30 seconds to do that, all right? So take a minute, use your mind's eye to see you in this moment. Grab your paper and your pencil, keep your eyes closed, and draw yourself in this moment. Okay. Now, this is me, and it's kind of hard to see because I have you can't see it at all. But look at your own, and mine's is pretty messy. I don't know what yours looks like, but mine's is pretty messy. And so the question is, when we look at ourselves and we see the mess, every now and then our childhood experiences will filter up to where we are now. And one of the things to kind of consider is when we look at ourselves in this small mirror, is to really realize that we all come with our own nuances. And Deborah spoke about, some of those adverse childhood experiences that we bring. And I like that she talked about how we need to recalibrate and we need to restructure our thoughts or ideas about self. And so this nuance of you, we are born with these innate capabilities. And the Lord says he knew us in our mother's womb. And so we come out with a personality, if you will. And for us to recognize the foundation of who we are, the bigger image is as God sees us. And so even in all of our messiness, God sees us as worthy. And so the interesting thing about that is neuroscience has let us know that if we think on the positive, we can literally restructure our brain. And so how do we grab hold of some of those childhood experiences? How do we grab hold of yesterday's experiences, if you will, so that they don't continue on a path of negative ideas and negative thoughts for us. Right? And so when we talk about that, there are things that can happen in terms of our stress response. And in that stress response, we have the fight, we have the flight, we have the freeze, we have all of these responses that surround us as we go from day to day. And so in that fight, if we were to find our spiritual self and kind of rethink that from a spiritual perspective, we do have all the social determinants of health. And those social determinants of health is all the stuff in our environment that impacts us every day. But if we were to look at that from our spiritual determinants and just breathe, if you will. So if we were to take, I'm going to go from, if you would breathe with me, we're going to do an inhale, we're going to do an exhale. And I'm going to take just a little bit of the 23rd Psalm because most people are familiar with that. But in those moments of fight, if we can just breathe in, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. If we breathe out on that flight, he makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. In those freeze, breathe in. He restores my soul. He leads me in the path of righteousness for his name's sake. If we were to breathe out on fawn, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. And in that process of learning, we learned that for you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And as we grow from that, knowing that, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. And then we come back to fight. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Because if we try to be in this world, and as we talk about the social determinants of health, the environment around us can be very stressful. And so a path of getting around that is one, whatever that may be, whatever that space is for you in terms of breathing and putting in the words to inhale and exhale and recalibrate the mind. Because the wonderful thing about the body is it's awesome. We're wonderfully made. We're very creative. But we do need something other than ourselves, whatever that spiritual determinant is for you. Without the guidance and support of our Heavenly Father, that higher being, the creator of life, we're going to end up flat on our back because all the stuff that's around us can be detrimental to our health if we're not very mindful. So I'm going to ask you to think about a childhood experience. What did you learn from that experience? How has it impacted your life? And I'm going to ask some of you to just kind of come off mic and then name one positive character trait you developed from that experience. And for me, I remember trying to be friends with two girls. My aunt was looking for me, and I saw her walking up and down the street, calling out my name as I hid under the porch, looking at her through the lattice. And I felt in my body that this was not a good thing to be doing. I saw her stress. I felt her stress. But I was more concerned with being friends of these two little girls. And so what I learned from that is, okay, Obed, this is not the way to be. And it's getting a little bit more challenging now with all the social media and how we are looking to be liked, looking to be subscribed to, whatever that is. And I think it was Deborah that also talked about, the technology that we have now, we don't hear and we don't listen to others. And so getting that genuine relationship with someone else is challenging, and it is causing some mental anguish around us today. So for me, I learned from that, okay, you don't really have to do all of this to have friends. Find those that are meant for you, and then those are your true friends. And so I'm going to ask if anybody would be so vulnerable to come off mic and maybe share a childhood experience that has impacted your life, and what positive trait did you develop from that experience?
Obed, this is
Yes.
Frances. In the sixth grade, I was chosen from my class to take our contributions that we had taken up for a girlfriend of mine whose father had passed, and I had never met her. Our grades were set up in 6A, 6B, 6C. So she was in a different class and she had lost her father. So I took the funds that we had to the family. And from that, I met the family and has been her girlfriend since that time. And what has happened with me is that I have an attitude of just helping others and being there for them and providing what they need in those moments of grief or not, just to be support.
Thank you so much, Francis. I appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Mm. Is there anyone else? Because I can't see the full screen of everyone. I know we have like 20 minutes. So I don't want to rush it either.
I'm willing to share.
Thank you, Diane.
I grew up with one of my great grandmothers living in our house for quite a while, and she was slowly becoming more demented. And I remember we had a back room in our house that's where she lived, and she had access to the rest of the house. But every night I'd always go in there and sit in this, just on a straight chair, and she'd be with the TV. And those are the days of 2, 5, 7, 9 kind of thing, and 11. And she would just constantly go around with the the TV changer. She said, "Oh, we're gonna find something new." And I would just sit there and just listen to her and talk to her and learn some Polish through her and stuff. And I always think back to that and how it really impacted my life and becoming more patient, especially with the elderly.
Thank you so much, Diane. I appreciate that. Thank you. And so when we consider, my experience, Diane's experience, Francis' experience, we bring all of that to us now, right? So we have Francis, who's very caring, Diane, who's very patient, me, and and myself, and all the things. It's like, okay, I need to just be me. Sometimes that's hard, and so when we're talking about who we are, we're talking about the interpersonal you, that introspection of self-knowledge, the ability to understand our own feelings, and allow us to better understand what stress is to us, what our weaknesses are. And then that interpersonal component, I'll come back to that, right? Because what we need to be recognizing of is, what is it? God created us in the womb. He knew us. What did we come out with? Because some of us, in terms of neuroplasticity, tells us there's these modules that we kind of fall into. And some of us may be linguistic. And that is the raw capacity of language, be it written, be it expressed, how we comprehend it, but it's also the sensitivity to tone, to rhythm, and to meaning, and to listen well. It's a skill because we can bring our own history and we can hear something someone says, and we might filter it through our own history, through our own past, and get it all mixed up and all very wrong. And so we need to be mindful of what that means in terms of if that's a skill for us. Not everybody is a good listener. Not everybody listens to words as they were meant to be said because they're filtered through something else. And then we talk about, are you more kinesthetic? And that would be one where movement and feelings and emotions just go through the physical body. You're very tactile and touchy-feely. I'm a hugger, so I will admit to being somewhat kinesthetic in the way I feel. I could watch a movie and want to cry. So, I can be that person at times. And then there's the logical component. Some people are more logical. The rare capacity to understand the underlying principles of connecting systems. And for me, that's a little bit like I was in school. It's like I had the questions. I wanted to know, like, how did you get from this to this? And so, I'm still that person. And it is, recognizing math. You might be very good at math and, the long chain of reasoning. And that does involve thinking it through. In this fast, quick society that we're in right now, we're not always thinking it through. We'll hear something or we'll grab something and then we've made a decision. And so we're seeing that. And again, I'm coming from a perspective of working with youth and how that's impacting them now because everything is quick and they don't have time to actually take the long chain of reasoning. And then the second part, or the last one I'm going to talk about, is musical. In itself, we kind of all know what musical is, but metacognitively, it really is being instinctual. And when you know something doesn't feel right, that's that part of you that says, okay, I'm listening to the identity of something. I'm listening to the rhythm of something. I'm reading between the lines and can experience things on another level. That's all that musical part of you. And if you like to listen to music and just sit back, you can hear all of that and you can decipher, music just as it is. But when you're out there in the world, this interpersonal you, all of this is behind you. So this is you inside of you, but then there's this, all of this behind us, all the people, all the situations, all the environment, the whole social determinants of health. This is where we show up. And so how we show up in that can be very stressful if we don't recognize where our strengths lie. If we don't recognize, okay, this is where my strength is, or this is where my strength is, or this is where my strength is, or this is where my strength is, because we have all of this in us, but there's parts that are just who we are. It's our strength, it's our strong suit, if you will. It's how you show up in certain situations. And so to be mindful of, who you are sometimes on a day-to-day in any given situation, it can be challenging. And so how do we manage the stress of knowing who we are and being in the world as well? And so one of those things to do is, recognize our strength. What does that mean to recognize our strength? We talked about, what some of our childhood experiences were. We talked about, our alliteration of, who we are and how we identify ourselves as we welcome everyone into the group. And so to recognize our strength is one thing, to really also recognize that we were born to create. It could be create relationships. It could be creating art. It could be raising healing for others. But we were born to do that. And if we use our strengths and if we know ourselves, we can do that so much more easily. I was going to say so much more better, but that would not be the proper thing to do. And so when we talk about, our strengths, we opened up with the welcoming and alliteration of you. Make a list, build out that list of, what is your strength? Build out that list of the ideas that come to you, and for whatever reason, you don't move forward with it. Think of the things that are desires of your heart, because those are the things that are within us to do. Those are the things that are within us to create. And when we don't do that, I think Dr. Sanders, I don't remember if it was him who said something along the lines of, we are obligated to do the things that we are called to do. Oh, it was malpractice if we don't do that. And so there are things that we are called to do. And if we don't do those, it is somewhat malpractice. Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about setting these goals, there are action steps. And we probably are all familiar with what a SMART goal looks like, that we will be very specific in that it is measurable, that it is achievable, that it is realistic, and that it is timely. And I will share with you where I am in my life at this point, because change is a challenge. And I have retired from one work and going into another industry as an author and starting a women's ministry. And my big ideas was to just boom, go. And I was like, oh, I need to step back and Lord, show me how to wait, because I was rushing it. And then I had to come back and look at this. Okay, be specific. Like, what is your book about? Is it measurable? How many people do you really want to reach with this? Is it achievable? Is it realistic? And is this the time to do that? Because I'm sure we all have something in our hearts to do. And is it the time to do it? Have we really put our heart into it to get it done? Right. And so when it comes to goal setting, we really need to think about, our obligation to make it happen because we are obligated and we were born to create. And we were born to create and use our gifts and talents to help others. And so when we're talking about helping others, when we have this idea to have this wonderful goal to get something done, there are setbacks because my idea of doing something, your idea of having an idea and just making it work is not always received because when we come out of ourselves and we are vulnerable to our ideas and want to share it with others, it's not always received. And so the good thing about that is our setbacks are our strength. And so when you get a no, are you able to take that no and build your strength from that? When you have someone that you thought was a very good friend, a mentor even, that says, not a good idea. What do you do with that? Do you feel defeated or do you build strength on that? Recognizing that you are obligated if something has been given to you to do, you're obligated to do that. And so there will be setbacks because there will be the naysayers. And so how do we come about and avoid the naysayers and keep moving forward in our strength? And some of that means being focused. And when we look at this particular wheel, this compass, what I like about this one, and I love to give a resource, so livingcompass.org, they have some great resources there. I was going to say they have also some courses and some classes, but they are a great resource. But I thought this was appropriate for today in terms of finding a true north, because we need to be grounded in our higher power, because it is the thing that's in us to make us move forward. It is that thing that's in us to make us obligated to something beyond ourselves. But part of that is being able to focus in an area at a time. So for me, I am here. I'm in this vocation, organization, mind piece, and the soul, spiritual rest and play piece, because I'm in a new area of life. I'm in a new area of vocation, and I really need to stay grounded to keep moving forward. But in that, I do have, as Tom introduced me, I've been married for 40 years. And so that's a real serious component of my life. I need to maintain that relationship with my husband. And the emotions involved in that, the intimacy involved in that is very strong. And I will say he is a wonderful companion in terms of allowing me to be in this new area, this new space. And we pray together in the morning. And that is the beginning of our day. Lord, show us what we got to do today to do your will that you have called us to do. And then give us the strength to do that. And I think that's how Dr. Sanders closed out. Give us the strength to get it all done so that our soul prospers as we're out here trying to make things work. So I'm going to ask you again to take a minute and list 3 things that would be considered your strengths, right? These are the things that come naturally to you. Maybe you're linguistically inclined, and so maybe your strength is writing a book, writing papers, writing wonderful emails, writing proposals. Maybe that's your strength, and you can use that to help others do their proposals. But then there's our weaknesses. It's not necessarily a weakness, but it's the areas that we need to grow in. So we need to recognize, okay, there are areas that I need to grow in. For instance, with me, with being an author, I need to grow in understanding the business of authorship because I did not have a clue of what was involved in that. So also recognizing where our weaknesses is. And then when we do this, we can see the opportunities ahead. So we can move past our weaknesses, look at our strengths and see the opportunities that are ahead for us. Particularly as health ministers, if it's the next person on the street, that's an opportunity for us to help that person. And then the threats, the things that are apprehensive. And what are those threats? It could be a memory that comes up from our childhood. It could be someone telling us no. It could be so many things. Working in an area that's not our gift. could be a threat as well, trying to do something that naturally does not come to us. And so think about that as well as you're setting your goals, as you're trying to reduce the stress. Make sure that you are working in your strengths, but also recognizing your weaknesses as well. And then when we're doing that, and when we've got an idea, we've got a plan going in place, we need to pause, we need to clarify, and then we need to decide. And so that, again, taking time to think it through. And so when we're looking at this, that quadrant here, to be very intentional so that we can be our most productive here. So in that wheel that we looked at, whatever your focus is going to be, if it's for you, if it's vocational, you know, what is it that's going to get me to the next place in this job, if it's vocational, okay, in my relationship, if it's that the area, whatever that area was on that compass, you know, really focus on that and prioritize those things, because we can try to do multiple things at once and fail at all, or we can focus on one thing and prioritize that, all right? And then in here, it's not urgent and it's not important. So the things that we need to rid ourselves of, get it out the way. I have a garden out front, and I know when the weeds start to grow, I need to pull those out because it looks very sloppy if I don't. And so there are people in our lives, there are activities in our lives that we need to remove some of that stuff so that we can focus here. All right? And then when we get over here, urgent, not important, this is where we begin to delegate stuff. All right. It's urgent. We need to get it done, but I don't have to do it all. And so who are those that can support you in that? Who are those who can actually help you set those boundaries in terms of your time? Okay, you've pruned some things, but who can now help you fill out that time to get the things done that you need to get done? All right. And it could be not just from some person that you meet up with personally. It could be, and I think Deborah said this as well, it could be a good book. It could be a podcast, whatever those resources is, it's going to help you delegate, delegate it to them, delegate it to the podcast. Okay, this is what I need to know. And find the resources that, you know, allow you to stay focused over here and what you have prioritized at this point. And then, God forbid, and God's help, that we don't end up here where it's urgent and important. Because if we haven't planned well, something's going to come about and we're not prepared. It's going to be unexpected and it's going to be unplanned. And so when we're talking about our life, when we're talking about our health, when we're talking about our mental well-being, a lot of the stress comes when we are sitting in this block up here, where it's urgent and important because we didn't start here with planning things out accurately. So the pressure of getting it done now is there. And so there'll be some PDFs, I believe, that's going to go out just so that you can kind of track that if you're just writing it down now, because it is noisy out there right now. And so the resilience is really, how do we silence the noise, right? And so I said it earlier that we can restructure the brain because neurons that fire together actually are wired together. And so our thought process is really silencing the noise that is around us. And we have a lot of noise right now. And I know for me, and I can only speak from first person, we had to cut off the news because it was just a lot of noise that was distracting me from my purpose, because I would listen to this or listen to that. And I was like, And so again, silencing the noise, because the mind, the brain is reactionary. And then we have that gut reaction, that intuition that kind of could get in the way of things, because that's where our emotions lie. And so we begin to react to our emotions. And so if we attach these reactions, then the emotions get all screwed up, and then our values can easily get screwed up because we're listening to so much noise. And so when we're talking about the social determinants of health, that's all the noise that's outside of us. When we're talking about the spiritual determinants of health, That's all the calm that's within us. It's our seeking that peace. It's that seeking that resilience. It's seeking the values that are put in us to do well. And it's the spiritual and the psychological flexibility to manage what's happening now. And to do that, it does take two parts of us. There is this objective us. It's the skills and the supports we have acquired. The objective you allows you to respond rather than react in different situations. And when we respond objectively, we can learn and improve. And so that time that we put aside, that area that we pruned, if that's that person in our life that's like, I need you to do this, I need you to do that, I need you to do that. How do we objectively say no? And we objectively say no by attaching that to our values. I would love to help you. My time is very valuable to me. And so what we can do is we can schedule a time to do this. And so you're not actually saying no, but you're giving an alternative answer that can keep you at peace, keep the relationship well, and attaching it to the values that you have so that person can recognize, okay, I understand time is important to you. And I understand that I need to recognize that. And then how to say no is part of that. But then there's the subjective you, the emotional state of you, and it's reactive. And it can lead to learned helplessness. Because if we approach, let's say this, if we don't prune the right people out of our lives, and we go to them and they're always giving us negative, then it becomes personal, it becomes pervasive, and it becomes permanent. And then we can tend to withdraw. And then there's the listening you, and it's the patterns of habit created in the brain that filters and manages incoming information. It's again that personal nuance, that interpersonal self, and our thought patterns. Mm-hmm. And I'm rushing a little bit because I know we're coming up on time. So how do you attach that? I gave the example of how do you attach, your no to your values. Again, the things that we're called to do, the things that we're obligated to do, things can get in the way. But, and I'll just throw up some value words here. Integrity is important to me, so I will. Right? So if people are relying on you for whatever reason, and you get into this funk where I just don't want to, just don't feel like it, come back to a value that you embrace. Right? Commitment's important to me, so I will get this done today. Are you reliable and trustworthy? I'm reliable, so. Courage and efficiency. I'm in a place now where it's all new to me, but I have the courage and I'll find a way. I was trying to do something the other day. My husband's like, you usually figure it out. And so I'm quite sure we probably all figure it out. As health ministers, we have to figure out a way to help others and put ourselves to the side. And that's what being reliable is all about. And so we're going to look at this figure here. I'm going to ask you all again to go into the chat and look at this and tell me, just what you see. Just drop some things in the chat in terms of what do you see in this ink block. Fairies, flying birds, fairies, flying angels coming together, dancers, angels, birds, lions and crowns, flying lions kissing with birds, flying angels, birds, lovers, ink blots, more ink blots, two lions nose to nose and a crab, love birds, two peregrines and two ballerina girls on the side. Oh, birds, what, angels in the middle and birds on the sides. Angels, ladybugs. I've never seen the ladybugs. Angels and birds. Right. And so this is just, how the mind and the brain, it just, fire together and wire together. So our experiences, what we bring allows us to see things others may see differently because we come with some experiences. And so for me, I see these two little bears right up in here. And it reminds me of Winnie the Pooh because of our children. we did Winnie the Pooh, the mini adventures of Winnie the Pooh. And so even as adults, my kids are like, Uncle Lux and Rules was still honey. And, they'll say that around people. And it's like, what are you talking about? And so for us, it's just this inside thing where, Winnie the Pooh and the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh was in our life. And so it's something that I see every time I look at this. But I see the crown, I saw the crab, so that we can see so much in here. But a lot of that, again, comes from our experience. And so we can tell we saw angels. And so a lot of us probably have the same upbringing, the same experience, the same spiritual foundation. So we see a lot of the same things. So thank you again for sharing and engaging with me here. And Terry, I'm moving on because I know we're quite. So are you ready to follow that inner compass that leads to a life of purpose, balance, and fulfillment? We need to bring our past experiences we talked about our lived experiences. We talked it out in groups. We made a list. Hopefully you made a list. We know our punchline, those things that we need to do, those things that we are obligated to do. Right? You identified an area of life to focus, hopefully. You prioritize some goals. You attach the value system to stay on point, to how to say no. We recognize others may see things differently than we do. And so now, what's the plan to see things differently and guide others in their strength as well? And so, I'm a post-it person. So here's my little post-it. This is how I love others. And so how do you love others? This is your plan. Who's your neighbor? Is it the person next door? Is it the person on the street? Is it the person walking into the store with you and getting eye contact and just saying hello? And I know when I'm out, just a simple hello can bring about some good conversation. We'll just that 15 minutes apiece because we need to find some solitude every now and then in the day. So how do you find that? And then how does your strength show up? Because we're gifted and talented. And then how does that show up? And then, what is your joyful scripture from wherever you pull that from? What is that thing that you can focus on any given day? For me, it's on any given day. I'm meant to prosper. And I need to focus on that and understanding what that means in terms of my obligation to do the Lord's will. Mm-hmm. And so your 360 action plan, how will you impact others for the Lord? Recognize your strength and use them. They're meant to be shared. Who depends on you, because that means a lot. If you have family, if you have those that you work with in the ministry, who depends on you to show up. List the opportunities ahead, whatever they may be for you. Who or what is your support system? Make sure you know who that is, wherever it may come from. A person, a book, a podcast, whatever that may be. And then name your gifts and your talents. Recognize what you bring because it can help others see their strengths as well. And then share your spiritual gifts. So, Terry, hopefully, I want to say thank you. I think I had a little bit less time than I anticipated, so I rushed it, but hopefully I wasn't too tongue-tied in that. But may we all press on in the calling before us and walk in God's strength to love our neighbor as we love God. I want to say again, thank you for the participation that you gave me. And please stay in touch. I have an online community. It doesn't cost anything. It's just on the first Saturdays from 8:30 to 3:30. Share it with others. You can just drop in and say, okay, this was my week today. I have the book, and it really does talk about it, takes us from all the things that our body does, and then it nicely transitions us into a Bible study for those who walk in Christian faith, because that's what the Bible study portion is. And then I do training and professional development through GBJ Education Services. So Terry, thank you for giving me time in this Health Ministers Conference. I appreciate all the feedback. I'm going to stop sharing now so that I can see the faces of everybody. There we go.
Thank you. And we want to know if really, it was a perfect closing for this day with the previous speakers. That's my opinion. So, in my humble opinion, my HMO, as my husband would say. So, does anybody have questions? And Obed, are you willing to share these slides?
Of course.
Okay,
There's
I'll do it
there's
as
a link to it. Well, yeah, I think there's a link, but also I can put it as a PDF.
If you send me, make sure I have the link, then I can put that when I send it. So that's easier for people. So thank
Okay,
you.
perfect. Yeah,
Thank you for
definitely.
being here.
Thank you
Thank you
so much,
all.
Obet. I just want
Thank you.
to close out our day with a couple of wrap-ups. We started our day with Diane, gave us a reflection that served as a reminder to have sympathy rather than judgment. And Deborah shared poignantly about her story and names emotional and spiritual healing stages and their connection to physical healing, which was fascinating. Deborah also reminded us that accepting help makes you a better giver. So practice makes perfect. Finally, she gave us historical lessons in healing. Eleanor Roosevelt said, "We must do what we think we cannot do." Dr. Sanders eloquently discussed one definition of spirituality being striving towards something greater than oneself. He reminded us that becoming spiritually competent helps us to help others. Spirituality's importance in social determinants of health. To address spirituality is not to practice religion, but to affirm the wholeness of their being. To not address spirituality is actually malpractice. Obet just encouraged us to find comfort in the messiness. I love that. I need to remember that. Very good, Obet. And to remind ourselves of our strengths and recognize that experiences from our childhood do help mold us as adults. She reminded us to prune, quiet the noise, and seek resilience. To end our conference for today, Abraham Lincoln was mentioned earlier, and ironically, I'm ending our day with a quote from him. A compass points the way, but not around the obstacles. So I think all of our speakers today helped us to manage the obstacles. So just a reminder that if you want to stay,